what I have done over the last several months is, first and foremost, make sure that we got eyes on the problem, that we shifted resources, intelligence, reconnaissance. We did an assessment on the ground. The second step was to make sure that we protected American personnel, our embassies, our consulates. That included taking airstrikes to ensure that towns like Erbil were not overrun, critical infrastructure like the Mosul Dam was protected, and that we were able to engage in key humanitarian assistance programs that have saved thousands of lives. The next phase is now to start going on some offense.
All right, the book on Benghazi and a basketball boss who busts himself for boorish and brutal comments. Keeping with the B concept, let us also go to President Obama and what will break on Wednesday. Around the Dial gives us a chance to present some of the best and brightest talk radio minds and mouths across the country. Let's welcome in one of the top-rated syndicated talkers in America, been slinging that brand of talk from the studios at KXL Radio in Portland, Oregon since 1997. A pleasure to welcome back host of the Lars Larson Show. Oh, that's right, Lars Larson. Okay, I had to get that in there.
That's right. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Good seeing you again, my friend. All right, let's get right to it. The president is going to speak on Wednesday. He promises strategy to the American public. What are you expecting?
Well, I'm not expecting much because this is a president who said as recently as a week ago that he had no strategy. Now, I know what that really means, and what Americans should think about is what that means. We know that the Pentagon, the State Department, all these various federal agencies all have plans for virtually every kind of occurrence that might happen. So they've had plans. Apparently, none of them have been plans that President Obama was willing to sign off on. So when he said he had no strategy, what he meant was, my administration has offered me all these alternatives, and I don't want to do any of them. Frankly, I think he'd like to ignore the mess that he helped create in most of the Middle East. And by ignoring it, meaning do nothing about it, while more people have their heads cut off and more people who are murdered because they're members of religious minorities by a group called ISIS or ISIL, and there's a significant difference between those two names, continues to, to do what it's doing, which is, terrorizing people, stealing billions of dollars from banks, and building up their power as what amounts to the first terrorist state in the world.
Lars, I think that when you come down to anybody who's a leader, whether it's a president, whether it's a senator, congressman, whatever, these are people that the Americans have to trust. There has to be some sort of level of respect, some level of trust that is in there. And if you look at everything that the president has done in the last 6 months, year, go ahead and pick your calendar date, why should people, whether you're Republican or Democrat at this point, trust that the president has a solid handle on what needs to be done and trusts what he tells you is the truth?
They shouldn't trust him. And let me tell you, I know for a lot of people who voted for Obama once or twice, they say, why can't we trust him? He's the president. Well, the experience of the last 5.5 years has showed us we can't trust him. He doesn't do his job. He routinely skips presidential daily briefings. He routinely tells Americans that on many of the major issues of the day, whether it's the IRS scandal or Benghazi or Fast and Furious, he finds out his news the same way we do. We see it on the internet, we hear it on the radio, we watch it on Newsmax TV, or we read it in the Daily Dead Fish Wrapper newspaper. So if this is a president who has the entire apparatus of one of the best intelligence services in the world, and he's offered up all this information literally on a daily basis so that he can be informed, when he chooses not to be informed, and he's made that choice over and over again, there's no reason to trust him. Plus, look at the kind of choices he's engaged in. He chose to back the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and look how that worked out. He chose to take out Gaddafi by running a lot of guns and weapons into that country, which flooded the country with the weapons. It did displace Gaddafi, who was a bad guy, but it replaced Gaddafi with a bunch of people who've been worse. It resulted in the murder of our first ambassador, murdered in 30 years, the murders of 3 other Americans, a secret or a scandal that we still don't know the bottom of yet. And so when we look at the kind of foreign policy he engages in, he promises Russia more flexibility, and they invade a country next to them that we have an agreement to help protect. And he says, well, I don't know what to do about it. I'm not going to do anything much about it. I'm not going to do anything much when they start lopping off the heads of American citizens, James Foley and Mr. Sotloff. When they're out murdering people for being religious minorities, the president effectively does nothing until the public hue and cry is so loud and so long that he's finally forced to do something. He's been forced into making some kind of statement this Wednesday because he found out that giving a short statement of condolence and then turning up on the golf course 15 minutes later didn't provide him with the proper optics. He thinks that the White House is all about theater, and he said so this weekend in the interview with Chuck Todd. He seems to think, I'm just not acting the right way. No, Mr. President, you're not doing the job. Be the leader of the free world. You got the job. A majority of Americans chose you. Now get out there and do the job. I don't think he's got what it takes to do the job.
Let's go ahead and spin to Benghazi now. There's new reports coming out, guys on the ground, the commandos who were there. I'm curious now, those who have been running from Benghazi for years at this point, it seems like decades in many ways, but after what we have learned now in the Fox report and what we're hearing, how do you think they're going to run now?
Brett Baird did an absolutely amazing job. And the bottom line is this. We had resources on the ground. And the 3 people that Brett talked to on camera and 2 more that were not interviewed on camera were ready to go that night, and they were deliberately held up. Now, the question of whether those orders came from just Bob, the name they chose for the supervisor, whose identity is hidden, were coming from Washington, D.C. or not, isn't as important to me as the fact that we know for a fact that Leon Panetta and others went to brief the president that night, told him our embassy was under attack. Did the president turn to these top advisors and say, you get every single resource on the ground there to the scene of that attack as fast as possible? No. He said, I'm going upstairs, meaning he was going to the official residence. Nobody today, almost 2 years later, knows exactly what he was doing. I strongly suspect he was going upstairs for a 2 to 3 hour debate prep session. So apparently this president, in my mind, decided that preparing for a presidential debate with Mitt Romney was more important than acting as the commander-in-chief and saying we're going to get every resource to the scene of that attack as fast as possible. And for people who say, well, they were probably already dead. How would you like it if your local police department said, you know, there's a report of a shooting at Lars's house, but he's probably already dead. We don't need to send anybody. Just have somebody come by, you know, a week or 2 from now and take a look at the scene. The fact is, when people are in trouble in this country, when Americans are in trouble and they're calling for help, you answer that call. And it's an outrage that we had those people on the ground a mile away and they were ready to go. And these are guys trained as special operators to be, these I think were private contractors, but they had military backgrounds, they had the weapons, they could have made a difference, and this White House ignored those cries for help.
Lars, couple of minutes we got left. Let's go ahead and spin to the domestic, if you will. The Atlanta Hawks owner, Bruce Levenson, outing himself basically, selling he's going to sell the team after sending an offensive email, and we'll show a little piece of that email here for our audience while we discuss this. Interesting, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar came out today in Time magazine and said Bruce Levenson isn't a racist. He's a businessman. Quote, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, business people should have the right to wonder how to appeal to diverse groups in order to increase business. Interesting comment coming from Jabbar, who slammed Donald Sterling when he came out with his problems.
Well, Sterling, you know what Sterling said was he said to his girlfriend or companion, whatever she was, I just don't want you to be seen with black men at the ball games. He apparently didn't care if she slept with them or did other things with them, but he didn't want her to be seen in public. Levenson's a bit of a different case. And if you think about it this way, how often have you heard about local employers, government employers, school districts, and others saying, how do we get more black employees to come to work for the district? And what are the human level, you know, realities of that? This man wrote in an email, as I understand the email, he said, look, we have a lot of black fans at the ball games. We need to get more white fans. There aren't enough black fans to be a fan base that will financially support the team. If that's being characterized as racist, then every single company out there that says, how do we re-up our clothing line so that we get more black customers buying our clothing line? You know, it's a business question, and I agree with Kareem.
Let's put it this way. I have a feeling that there is going to be a little bit of a discussion now as to what NBA owners are going to be looking for in a situation like this. Because, Lars, I don't know, I spent many years around sports, and I can tell you that the discussion that Bruce Levenson had here, I have heard at every single major league franchise that I have ever been around. The same discussion, certainly maybe not the same language, but the same sort of concept to sell. And that's something that is going to be sticking with people for a long, long time. All right, my friend, that's going to have to do it for today. We're all out of time. We could spend another couple of hours here. We appreciate it, as always. Lars Larson, the syndicated Lars Larson Show. And we will see you again very soon. We'll make sure that after all this happens with Benghazi and the rest, we'll get you back on real soon.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time on Newsmax. It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Lars. Take care of yourself, my friend. All right, later on this hour, why would someone put their life on the line just to cover stories? Why would they go overseas and risk death? Learn from one who knew, Stephen Sotloff. And after the break, the Sunday sound-off from politicians and those who comment on matters presidential. And it wasn't pretty at all for the White House. Then again, if you consider that what we have heard on Sunday shows here in the last couple of weeks and months and years has not been pretty for the White House. It all continues right here on MidPoint.